We are told from day one that family is the ultimate safety net, that biological ties guarantee a secure place to land when the rest of the world gets tough. But what happens when the people designed by biology to protect you are actually the source of the damage? When the very structure meant to hold you up is actively crushing you under a chronic, systemic weight? Children trapped in emotionally immature homes learn very early that their true identities are dangerous. To survive, they silence their actual needs and adopt a compliant role self, a version of themselves custom-built to keep the peace and win whatever scraps of affection are available. Clinical psychologist Dr. Lindsay Gibson mapped this dynamic in her foundational research on emotionally immature parents. She showed how children contort their personalities to adapt to caregivers who are entirely disconnected from reality. Operating in that environment hardwires a corrupted rulebook into a child's brain. Don't feel, don't speak, and don't trust. It is a brilliant survival strategy for a 7-year-old, but it traps you in a cycle of self-denial you might not even realize you are running. Sustaining that fabricated role self into adulthood takes an immense physiological toll. The chronic stress of monitoring your every move to avoid upsetting your parents eventually bubbles up as severe anxiety, depression, and physical exhaustion. Then comes the breaking point. This is the moment where the internal cost of playing the dutiful role finally outweighs the perceived benefit of keeping the family happy. You realize the peace you are keeping is entirely at your own expense. But trying to fix these psychological wounds while remaining deeply enmeshed with the people who share your DNA and expect your compliance is nearly impossible. You cannot heal your nervous system in the exact environment that originally corrupted it. To actually recover, you have to alter your physical and emotional proximity to the threat. Breaking a trauma cycle is a structural issue of controlling who gets access to your nervous system. You cannot debate an emotionally immature parent into treating you with respect. For those who cannot physically walk away, the first lever of defense is internal distance. Psychologists call this detached observation, or the maturity awareness approach. You step mentally outside the interaction. Instead of reacting when they criticize or bait you, you observe them as a flawed operating system. You silently narrate their behavior in your head, noting how they deflect or lash out, keeping your own emotions entirely out of reach. The objective here is to abandon the hope of achieving a healthy, reciprocal relationship with them. You are simply managing the interaction as neutrally as possible. By shifting from participation to observation, you build an internal psychological firewall. Their toxic behavior might still happen, but it hits a wall before it can access your emotional triggers. Sometimes internal boundaries are not enough. The second lever is low contact, a highly structured logistical fortress that replaces the unpredictable nature of occasional phone calls or visits. You dictate the specific medium, like text or email only. You set a rigid time window to check messages once a day, and you refuse to engage with anything outside of shared obligations. Logistical details get a short response. Emotional bait gets completely ignored. Then there is the third lever, no contact. This is an absolute self-protective boundary where all forms of interaction cease entirely. Absolutely no texts, no checking their social media, no updates through mutual friends. This step becomes necessary when a person refuses to respect any limits you set, or when their behavior crosses into active, ongoing abuse. While often viewed as a punitive measure, these boundaries actually function as the physical severing of the transmission lines that allow generational trauma to infect your present life. There is a popular myth that the moment you cut off a toxic family member, you feel instant, overwhelming relief and joy. In reality, you are hit with a wave of ambiguous loss, mourning a person who is still alive but entirely unsafe to be around. Therapists refer to this as the both-and reality. You have the capacity to deeply grieve the loss of the loving family you desperately wished you had, while simultaneously knowing that walking away was the only way you would survive. Experiencing profound sadness does not mean the exit was a mistake. It is simply your brain's natural response to severing a deeply ingrained biological bond. The grief is heavy, but it is a clean pain, unlike the chronic suffering of staying. Once that bond is severed, you enter the final sociological phase of an empowered exit, a process researchers call emotional resocialization. This diagram maps a family exiter's psychological trajectory, moving out of a damaging status position and eventually landing at long-term well-being. Notice this note. You are replacing that corrupted childhood rulebook with new norms, building relationships where it is safe to feel, speak, and trust. Choosing to leave is an act of self-preservation. By absorbing the pain of the past and refusing to pass it on, you terminate the toxic cycle at its source. You reclaim your own life, ensuring the next generation never runs that same corrupted rulebook.